Hey everybody, this is Steve with Ubisec, and we're here to talk about cybersecurity and everything that you need to know to defend, secure, and thrive in your organization's digital environment today. All right, so let's get started with a few quick introductions. We'll begin with our founder of Ubisec Systems, President and Chief Technology Officer, Edward Sohn. In addition to being our President and CTO, Eddie's also a cyber and information security expert, certified by international standards bodies and vendor security technology companies alike. Hey, what's going on, Eddie?
Not much, Steve. Good to be here. Excited to be in this webinar.
Awesome, me too. Glad to be here. All right. Well, I'm Steve Chinen, Business Development Lead for Ubisec Systems, and we're both looking forward to being with you all for the next half hour. So let's get started.
Let's do it.
All right. So cybersecurity. How can we defend against malicious threat actors, secure our virtual and physical infrastructure, and most importantly, thrive in our service to our customers and financially within our own organization? So what are we going to be talking about today? First, we're going to start with what you should know about cybersecurity. Next, we're going to discuss just why cybersecurity is critical to your organization. Then we're going to address the top cyber threats to your organization. From there, we'll talk about the concerns raised over cybersecurity. And finally, we'll go over our recommendations and takeaways. So before we move on, for those of you cable cord cutters out there, or are always on the lookout for free downloads of your favorite series like HBO Max's Game of Thrones, this one's for you.
Oh, hey Dave, did you watch last night's episode of Game of Dragons?
No, I've been doing the cord cutting thing the last couple of months.
It was amazing.
know,
You
right?
have to watch it.
Right, Craventhal's Squid Army
Come on.
Unreal.
Sorry, spoilers. I'm sure it'll be streaming somewhere soon. You gotta watch it. Anyway.
Game of Dragons. So good. How do I get my hands on that episode? Ooh, what's this email? Extortion Entertainment Spy. I mean, a random email never hurt anybody. Let's take a look here. Ooh, aha. Free is always the right price.
There's no such thing as a free stream. We have your data locked. Wire $1,000 in Bitcoin in the next 10 minutes or we'll delete your data.
Boy, this would not be a big deal if I just backed up my data like Sid told me to.
What was that?
Nothing. Great.
Oh man, that's good stuff. And who comes up with these random fake TV show names anyway? Man, it's so weird. All right, Eddie. So I feel it will help our audience if we just start from the beginning. Eddie, so what should we know about cybersecurity?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. It's a great segue from that awesome video. I think that sets everything up for us. A little humorous start, but now let's get into the nitty-gritty here. So I want to start with cybersecurity as an overview. I think that's important to give some context because we all have a misconception or a preconception of what cybersecurity is. So let me just unpack it a little bit and explain some of this stuff. Okay, so why is this an important subject? Okay, it's an important subject because your organization, all you people who are in the webinar, your organization or your business is digital. Okay, either you're fully digital or you're just primarily digital, but for the majority of you, you're majority digital. Okay, and what that means is, if you compare 20, 30 years ago, there's this concept of this thing called paper. You may have heard of it before, paper and pens and pencils, okay? And all this paper had important documents and you would store them in file cabinets and they'd be locked away and you have a physical key, okay? Maybe the extent to your digital organization back then was email or you visit a website. Now it's completely flipped in the opposite direction. All your files are now digital. So they're still stored in a filing cabinet, but it's a virtual filing cabinet. It's in cyberspace. It's on a server store. It's in the cloud or off-site somewhere, but it's electronic, okay? Your phone system's digital. All your banking is done digitally now. All your portals that you use for maybe your accounting system or your HR system, it's all digital. Okay, your website, everything. So your business is primarily digital. So the issue is you have more potential for attacks due to this larger footprint. So you got more to protect. And alongside of that, the hackers are still ahead of us all the time. These criminals, okay, they're more sophisticated. They have more knowledge, more know-how, more technology and financial resources than ever before. So, as far ahead as that they were ahead of us, 20, 30 years ago, they're further ahead now. So we're behind the 8 ball, okay? So let me further highlight this by explaining what cybersecurity is not. Okay, we have this preconceived notion that cybersecurity is a device or a tool or appliance or a firewall. It's not. It's not any sort of device or technology. We think it's maybe related to a person or a team of people or a group of people or a company, and it's not. It is not any tangible thing, one tangible thing. Okay. So what is cybersecurity? Cybersecurity, it's a logical framework for protecting your digital assets. I've come up with this definition. It's loosely based on industry, open standards, and standards bodies, but it's my definition just to make it simple. A logical framework for protecting one's digital assets. Okay? So what do I mean by that? If you think about it, let's make an analogy to a toy. Back in the 70s and 80s, there's this thing called a Russian doll. It's probably still popular today, but I used to even have one of these. And basically what it is a piece of wood that looks like a doll, and it has this outer shell. It's a very thin thing, and it comes apart. Okay, when you take that outer layer off, there's an identical looking Russian doll underneath there with a shell of wood. Okay, just a smaller version. You take off that shell, and underneath there's another shell, and then another shell, and another shell. And as you can see in the photo, it gets to this smallest little doll that's a solid piece of wood. Okay, all look the same. Think of that as your digital asset. Okay, your digital asset is what you're trying to protect. It could be intellectual property. It could be some sort of, think of it as anything that's valuable for your organization. Maybe you're a software development company and this is your code that you developed over years. If that was stolen, that was resold on the dark web, or somebody held it for ransom, how damaging would that be for their business? Okay, so the idea of this Russian doll is, and cybersecurity, it's linked to cybersecurity, is you're protecting that digital asset with a shell. Okay, now how many of those shells you have and how thick and robust those are really just at the end of the day defines your security posture. Okay, so some of you might have one or two shells, one or two layers. Okay, some of you might not have any layers, God forbid, but some of you might have 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 layers, and that's great because at the end of the day, you're never going to be, there's not a silver bullet. You're never going to be able to thwart these attackers. You're just going to create shells by which, if the outer layer is somehow compromised, there's another layer to thwart the attacker, and then another and another, and eventually they'll stop. Okay, but the point is you want to create this multi-layered effect. That is the strategy. That's the approach to this cybersecurity framework.
I don't know, Eddie, before I get into it, just looking at those Russian dolls, it kind of freaks me out. It feels like they're just looking at me. I don't know what's going on.
That's why I stopped playing with them myself.
Okay. You feel me on this, right? Thank you. All right. So Eddie, there's really no one size fits all, huh? To protect you from everything. It seems like you have to protect different layers of your network, and in turn, each section protects and strengthens your network security comprehensively.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Got it. All right, cool. So Eddie, so who are these people that we need to protect against?
Yeah. So I think there's also this misconception that, the actual malware or the ransomware or the Trojan horse or the software that infiltrates your machine is the attacker. Okay. But at the end of the day, that's the transport mechanism. That's the thing that does the damage, right? Behind that, there is a person. Always there's a person at the originating source that has created this malicious, malignant software. Okay. And it's unfortunate, but these are criminals. Okay, at the end of the day, that's who we're talking about. Criminals, no different than your everyday criminals that you might see on the street, thieves or murderers or something like that. Hopefully not on your street, but these are people. Okay, the problem you'll never know who these are. Sometimes you'll never find them, you never see them, you'll never know their name, you don't know where they're from, where they live, any of that stuff. They could be from anywhere in the world. Okay, most commonly these days, there's a lot of organizations and organized crime, cybercrime, overseas in Eastern Europe, Eastern Asia, very popular pockets of cyber criminal activity. So that's where you're probably going to see them, but they really can be from anywhere, over even in the United States. Okay, in fact, these can be people inside your organization, strangely enough, or they can be people that who used to work for you or with you. Okay, so it is any person, any criminal that's a single person, a group of people, a team, an organization. These can go up to state-sponsored organization, terrorist groups. Okay, there are governments, again, probably under the cuff, but there are governments who sponsor cyber attacks on other countries. Okay, it's like organized crime. Okay, and those that at that scale, those are like almost companies who hack for benefit, right? And they get paid. They look like employees of a company. Okay, but at the end of the day, what motivates these people? Okay, it's the same old story: money, 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 money. Financial gain is why they do it. So if they are criminals that are maybe smaller time or smaller organizations or just greedy for money, they're the ones delivering the ransomware and getting the financial gain by you paying that ransom, or they steal your information, resell it on the dark web, and they get some money that way. Those are the ones who are looking for personal financial gain. Again, there are larger organizations, there are terrorist organizations who get paid tons of money from sponsorships, and they have larger scale technology and tools and resources to be able to do a lot more damage. So the scale, increases and decreases depending on what, the target is and the value. But at the end of the day, it's financially motivated. Okay, there might be a small faction of these criminals who are in it for the fame and the glory. And you might hear this when you read some of the news stories in the media. You'll hear about these hacking organizations. They have names even. They're like, it sounds like a sports team name, like Dark Web One has infiltrated, Google or something like that, right? You'll see that in the news. So there's a little bit of pride and personal, kind of arrogance and fame that goes into that ego aspect. That's definitely something that attracts hackers. Okay, but going back to those insider people, it could be somebody who is disgruntled, who you fired or who you laid off, and they didn't agree with you. They might have some inside knowledge, and they might relay some of this to some cyber criminals, and that's how they do damage back to you. So it could be a vendetta, personal vendetta, just like I'm disgruntled, it could be somebody inside your organization who sees like low-hanging fruit, like I can get some quick money. I'm walking across to the bathroom, and I notice on the head IT network security administrator's computer that his password is on a Post-it note on his monitor. If I get that, I have the keys to the kingdom, and then maybe I can, steal some valuable information, right, and sell it or do whatever. So as you can see, it just runs the gamut as far as what is possible and who these people are.
Hey, that's crazy, because like at different organizations in the past, I've seen people that have actually put their passwords on a Post-it.
I think we've all seen it, unfortunately.
Yeah. Right.
We won't
right.
admit it, but we've seen it. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's crazy that there's so many different types of people. I mean, on one end, like you said, there's that group Dark Web 101 that's gonna take millions. Then we have Sebastian, who's in his grandma's basement.
That's right.
Stealing information to fund his Xbox addiction. Or we got
some ingenious teenager kids who are exactly fit that description. Exactly.
Exactly. So that's crazy how much we have to pay attention, and even in just offboarding or terminating an employee just for the reason that person, John in accounting, could maliciously hurt your company on his way out. So, man, geez. So, Eddie, we've talked about the types of people to be aware of. So, what are some of the threats that we should be concerned about?
Yeah. So, I hate to make this story worse and worse as we get, into the cybersecurity story, because now we've talked about the bad people and scary people. And now we're going to talk about like, what are the scary things that they do? Okay. So there are a bazillion types of threats out there. We don't have time to go through them all. A lot of them have names, individual names. They have variants as well. So think about viruses or different variants, variant 1, 2, 3. I mean, it's literally like that. So it's useless to go over every single one. But what I want to do is highlight the top 3 that I think are going to be, that are already prevalent, that are things that you might see in the near future, or you've seen it already, or you've experienced it, God forbid again. But these are ones that if you just have some awareness of and understanding, then you might understand the nature of at least something of how to combat it. Okay, so the first one I want to talk about, something very common, everybody knows it. It was what the video started off with, ransomware. There's, it's funny that that video has created, there's now comedy around ransomware because it's so prevalent, right? But at the end of the day, that's the exact story. It was comical, but it was accurate because it leverages the weakest part of the cybersecurity story. Okay, and that is the human factor. The human factor is always going to be the weakest link in your security, framework. Okay, and what happens with ransomware, okay, is these bad actors and cyber criminals, what they'll just do is they're creating malignant software. Okay, they're just coding it malignantly, excuse me, and it's designed basically to install, unbeknownst to the user, on your machine and encrypt all your data, encrypt your hard drive, rendering your whole PC, your whole machine, and outlying PCs, because it spreads across the LAN, and your servers unusable, encrypts the whole thing. But at the end of the day, the screen pops up just like that video and shows you to pay this ransom, okay, via a phone number or an email contact, either via Bitcoin or whatever it is, credit card or check or cash. And as funny as that sounds, they will give you a decryption key to unlock your environment. Okay. It is hilarious because there's actually a code of ethics amongst the ransomware community. Isn't that silly? But when you think about it, it's ingenious because these people are delivering some real damage to your organization. They could leave you like that, but they're not getting anything out of it, right? So if they want to get the money from you, they're holding your data ransom, okay? And in fact, they do their research and they make sure that you're able to pay that ransom. Okay, so it might be at a smaller organization, thousands of dollars, larger organization, tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, who knows? Something you can just barely pay maybe just to get your data back. We don't ever, advise that, of course, but hopefully you have good disaster recovery plans and backups to recover from that. But if you have to pay it, technically you can get your data back, which is so strange. In fact, I want to highlight this story that just was in the front page news just a few months ago. If you've read the news recently, in Las Vegas, the MGM Group, hotel group, and Caesars Palace, they got hit by a ransomware. Okay, huge story. Caesars Palace ended up paying the $30 million ransom, okay, to get their data back, and they got it back somehow. We don't know any fallout or anything that happened as a result of that, but in short, that's a story. Now MGM, on the other hand, took the opposite approach. They took a hard stance. They said, we're not paying this ransom. So they just started trying to recover from the ransomware outage, and it was a mess. Okay, it took like 2 weeks. They were completely down. During that time, like, people couldn't get into their hotel rooms. All the slot machines were turned off. All their servers were down, so you couldn't do any sort of e-commerce. You couldn't get on the web. Their apps wouldn't work. All that stuff. At the end of the 2 weeks where supposedly they recovered, okay, it was estimated that they lost in lost revenue in the order of $100 million, $100 million plus. So when you think about it, kind of funny, if you paid maybe the 30 million that whether they got, ransom for that or not, versus $100 million, you could have actually got out ahead if you paid the ransom. But, it's water under the bridge because nobody ever thinks that they're going to, not be able to recover, right? So that's just the story there is that you want to be able to have a recovery plan, right? That's kind of the lesson learned there. But that's a huge story. Go read about it when you get a chance. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is identity theft. Identity theft is something you guys should all know about anyway. I mean, identity theft applies to every facet of our lives. In fact, like if you're doing any sort of online banking, if you use a credit card, you probably had your credit card number stolen at some point in time. In fact, I don't know anybody who has not had some strange charges that happen on their credit card. Thankfully, these credit card companies, they understand fraud, they take care of it. But it's really the same idea as that applies to the digital world, okay? And it is maybe interconnected in some ways because if we're talking about online banking, it's the same as your HR portal or your accounting portal or logging into XYZ site. If you get those credentials that you log into stolen, then obviously just think about if the stakes are higher, how much you have to lose, right? So how does this happen? I mean, it's the same approach as your personal environment. If somebody steals your credentials, they trick you into putting your information onto this fake website and they capture it somehow, or the hackers get into, and you've heard these stories as well, they get into the accounting firms or something like that, and they hack into them, they steal millions of passwords, right? And they try to post them on the dark web and resell them and things like that. So if it gets stolen that way, that's a very common way. They can get stolen via just some sort of man-in-the-middle attack. So if you're actually if you have weak network security controls and somebody actually intercepts your data transmission to a website and they can retransmit and just manipulate all that, that's a man-in-the-middle attack. That's definitely possible as well. Tons of different ways. But in the end, your password is not strong enough. There's not even a strong enough password nowadays to thwart some of these supercomputing capabilities. So having another layer of authentication is absolutely critical. Okay, the last one I want to quickly talk about, denial of service, or DDoS, distributed denial of service. Okay, it's simply the concept of denying access to legitimate services. So the hacker is trying to prevent legitimate operational transactions, operations, services, business from occurring, okay? Digital resources for you or, your customers or your partners. So how do they do that? Okay, so just take, for example, the e-commerce world, which denial of service attacks are very common. Let's take an Amazon. So you're shopping at Amazon. Imagine if Amazon, all of a sudden, their website went down and you couldn't buy anything, right? It's an inconvenience. You know that. You probably hardly see that because they have so many controls in place and they're very redundant. But from Amazon's perspective, imagine if they were down for that 1 second for the entire world, okay? How many millions of people are shopping online at any point in time at Amazon? That's potentially millions and millions of dollars in loss every second. I mean, this is a $1 trillion company. So a hacker using a distributed denial of service attack will take control, write code to take control of vulnerable machines, PCs and workstations that are just kind of flapping on the internet, no security, totally vulnerable. And these PCs will become part of their botnet, what's called a botnet. So it's just think of it as a remote control of potentially tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of PCs all at once. And at the attacker's command, they will all send traffic to Amazon servers at the same time. So if you can think about that, they're sending this illegitimate traffic so that the servers become overwhelmed and they can't process their transactions. Thus, they're preventing you from processing a legitimate transaction. So denial of service, okay? Internet connection, all these machines sending that data all at once. Just to put it in layman's terms, if you have an internet connection at home, like maybe it's 100 megabits per second, a distributed denial of service attack will overrun that. You know, depending on how big this botnet is, they could be sending multiple gigabits of traffic per second. So you won't even be able to use your internet connection because it's just saturated and flooded. So it's very damaging. It's very hard to defend against, quite honestly. And you don't want to experience that. Okay. I used to work in e-commerce for 20, 30 years ago, and we experience it almost daily. So how does this apply to small, medium business? It does, because if you use your internet connection for anything, and if that's not available, is that damaging to your business? Maybe, maybe not. Do your phones go over your internet? Is that important to you? Your email, if you can't send and receive email, is that important to you? If you can't get to that, portal, that, as a service portal or some sort of online resource that runs your business in logistics or human resources or accounting, if you can't do that, is it crippling to your business? If it's only a few seconds, maybe it's not a big deal. But what we're talking about is potentially hours to days to weeks, okay? And that's the problem. So anyway, I could go on and on because there are tons, but those are the three that I want to highlight.
Yeah, I remember watching, I think it was one of those Die Hard movies, Live Free and Die Hard, and they had hackers that just flooded the airways. So the only channel was this continuous splice of just crazy video that they were just using to distract the government. And in the meantime, they were taking down the network of the FBI, and then they were in turn taking money from the Social Security Association. So it was like just flooding the airwaves, and then, but they had a different plan to do that.
And in fact, that is definitely a technique to use with denial of service attack. But what you've described is actually specifically a whole different, another specific attack. So that's how many variants of this there are. That's what makes it so interesting and fascinating, and yet very scary.
Yeah, it is. It is. So just to be clear, because we're talking about a variety of different types of attacks. So the difference between a ransomware attack and a distributed denial of service attack is that quite often these bad actors will launch a DDoS attack for strictly malicious reasons. Like you said, clogging up the bandwidth of your e-commerce site, clogging up your servers, not allowing any traffic to your site, while ransomware attacks are typically a business transaction done to take as much money as they can from your bank account. Is that right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. If I can make a quick analogy, I would say like a denial of service attack or a DDoS attack is almost like it's like a war. Think of it like as a missile war or something like that. You're just sending all your missiles to that location, and you're just on the offensive, right? And you don't care about collecting anything or taking anything. Whereas a ransomware attack is almost like a spy, right? An assassin or a spy that is very, in the shadows, and finds his way into your organization and takes what he needs and delivers that scalpel like damage. So yeah, exactly.
Oh man, it sounds just like the DDoS is just strictly destruction. Like when you're talking about missiles.
Exactly. It's just preventive, operational, malicious destruction. Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. So talking about ransomware, identity theft, DDoS attacks, what types of impact will happen to these businesses?
Yeah. So yeah, this is the unfortunate thing, and it's not really meant to create too much fear, but it's just the reality. Okay. And this is why we have to take it seriously. Okay. Because I found this startling statistic that 75% of small businesses don't survive a cyber attack, and they have to close down. 75%. That's 3 out of 4 businesses. It almost seems unrealistic, and it almost seems like that doesn't make sense. But when you think about it, if your business is digital, if you decide to start out on paper, maybe that's one thing, and it doesn't apply, who knows? But most businesses are digital. If your business is digital, and we're in the order of what we're talking about being down for an order of days or weeks or your intellectual property is stolen, or all your machines are rendered useless because they've been encrypted, you know, how long can you survive? It actually is kind of realistic. So that is like, those are the stakes. Okay. Can you afford to do that? All right. Can you afford to ignore your cybersecurity framework, building that framework? I don't think so. It's critically important. And here's the misconception, I think, as what else also found is we always think that it's only the Googles or the Microsofts or the Amazons that get hit. Okay. And we hear that when we hear those things in the news, and they have been in the news, it's front and center. It's front page news. But why? Because it's media. It's exciting to read, right, for the consumer. But in reality, the small, medium businesses, the commercial businesses, the mid-markets are the ones who are getting hit more. But they're never going to make the news because it's not sexy enough. It's not front page news, okay? But when you think about it, putting yourself in the hacker and the cyber criminal's mindset, the small, medium businesses are easier. They're lower hanging fruit. Like if I target 1,000 small, medium businesses versus one larger enterprise, you know, the larger enterprise, that maybe the stakes are higher, like the value, the target is higher, but there's so many more resources to circumvent on the network security side. So it's harder, it's more difficult. Whereas if I target all these smaller businesses who don't have the financial strength or don't have any sort of sophisticated technology or know how to implement a cybersecurity defense, and I know what the value of that target is and what their digital asset is, then I'm going to go after that. And I can do it much easier. So that is the reality, is that small, medium businesses are at higher risk than enterprises. And this has been founded. I mean, right there, Forbes has founded that. So you cannot ignore this at all.
Yeah, it's kind of like a burglar going for just a regular house versus a mansion in Bel Air or
That's
something.
right.
You know the mansion's got security, top of
That's
the
right.
line, everything, but this medium-sized house might not have any security,
Right.
you know?
Or like
They
the
might just
mom
have
and
a
pop.
padlock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The mom and pop shop store, hardware store versus, you know, trying to rob a Home Depot, right? It's like they're not going to have the same defense level, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Man, that's some scary stuff there. So Eddie, we've talked about the cybersecurity overview, the bad actors involved, top 3 cyber threats out there, and the consequences. So what are some takeaways from everything that you've discussed today?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the brass tacks. This is what, if you can't remember anything of this webinar, this is what I want you to remember. This section. So these are our recommendations. These are things that you can take away. Okay. So number 1, just don't ignore cybersecurity concerns and risks. Like, just as a result of this webinar, be more aware. Okay. One thing I mentioned is think like a hacker. Okay. Think like a hacker. Or a cyber criminal. Hopefully none of you are criminals, but if you put yourself in the criminal's shoes, like, what are they looking for in your organization? What would they be? What's your digital asset? Spend more time and energy and focus protecting that resource. Okay, wherever it is, however it's stored, you know, however it's presented, like, spend the time to do that. And then look for the gaps. Like, if I'm a hacker, I'm looking for openings. You know, these criminals, they don't just jump in and attack your organization right off the bat. They do weeks, maybe months of research first. Okay, I can guarantee you right now at this moment that if I look at your firewall logs, somebody is what's called fingerprinting your network, which means they're scanning your firewall for open ports that they can circumvent. Okay, that they can try to get into your network through. Okay, it's happening constantly, and these people are from all over the world, so you can't stop them. So how much visibility do you have? So think like a hacker. Okay, plan and consider your cybersecurity activities proactively. Don't be reactive, proactive. Okay. Another thing is to educate and train your staff. Okay, I can't emphasize this enough. I gave you the example of, this being in the video, right? It's just a simple worker who opened his email, right? And in fact, to highlight the story of the MGM and Caesar story, the actual malicious payload of the ransomware was delivered through a social engineering technique. Okay, and that's like another way that these hackers can get in. So they researched their organizations, they found out who their external help desk companies were, they impersonated, and they found out who the network administrators were. They impersonated the network administrators, called in the help desk, pretended to be them, say, hey, reset my password. Okay, and then they just went ahead and reset the password. So they had the keys to the kingdom, and that's how they delivered the ransomware. Okay, so it's not the responsibility solely of your cybersecurity professional or your IT manager or director or your management, your CEO. It's everyone from the CEO all the way down to the admin assistant, to the data entry person, okay, to the receptionist. If you have any sort of computing function, you're a potential target. Okay, so you have to educate your staff. Okay, another thing I would suggest: leverage cutting-edge cybersecurity tools. Okay, this is the low-hanging fruit. Like, don't just ignore the fact that we're talking very logically here and very, esoterically. It does come down to implementation of solutions too. But you have to start with an assessment. So, try to find out where your weaknesses are, your vulnerabilities, your gaps. We have an online tool on our website. I'm sure Steve will highlight it. It's free. It's not comprehensive. It's rudimentary, but it's a starting point for you to kind of understand. And are you doing the things that are necessary to protect yourself in today's digital age? Okay. Take it further. Get a manual assessment. Look for gaps. Okay. But like I said, low-hanging fruit are: make sure you have some of the basic technologies in place to prevent just things from happening. A firewall, regular firewall is just not enough. You need a next generation firewall. These are the ones that are going to look for the newest, latest, and greatest types of attacks and prevent against those. So you got to be able to protect against those types of attacks. Endpoint security is your last line of defense. Okay, so you might have antivirus software. It's just not enough anymore. You have to have next generation endpoint security tools living on the PCs. If they get past your firewall into your network, that's your last line of defense. Okay, so having the ability to block the event before it even reaches your CPU processor or your hard drive, that's critical. Okay, web DNS security is huge. If you have a distributed workforce or hybrid environment, we're in this hybrid remote age. How are you going to protect those workers if they're not behind your firewall at your office? Well, they need a virtual firewall. So that is where the web DNS security comes in. Email, and obvious, it's still probably the highest attack vector. Okay, ransomware is commonly delivered through email. So imagine if that email with that ransomware link is blocked before it even enters your organization, before it even gets to that end user. That's like the dream, right? You don't want to even see it because that next generation email security has classified and profiled that email as something potentially malicious and dangerous and blocks it automatically. Okay. And then multi-factor authentication, we talked about it briefly, but it's just another layer of authentication. But having a tool that's robust, that integrates into all your various business processes and all your different tools and portals, whether they're internal portals or external portals, it's a huge value add to have something that just adds that layer where identity theft occurs. You're still safe because you also need that extra layer. Okay, and the last thing I'll just say is get a cybersecurity company or professional or expert just to come alongside you and have them, look for gaps. Just analyze your organization, help you find the vulnerabilities, look for gaps, and help you protect against those things. Okay, so those are my takeaways, and I would say, if there's one thing I could just boil it all down to, okay, for a final takeaway, is be vigilant. Be vigilant. That means don't ignore this, number one, and don't treat it as a one-time event or occurrence or exercise. But you got to be vigilant because the cyber criminals evolve, the threats evolve constantly. They're looking for new ways all the time to, infiltrate your organization. So you have to be able to protect against those things. And being able to be vigilant is analogous to creating those multiple Russian doll layers. Okay, just keep doing that because they're breaking down and you got to build them back up. Okay, so those are the things that I would say. And that's my takeaway. And yeah, there you go, Steve.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Eddie. Appreciate all your wisdom that you shared with our audience today. Now, I'd love to get some free giveaways for you all. So first, we have our handy cybersecurity posture assessment quiz that Eddie had mentioned briefly earlier, and it's to help you and your organization just take a snapshot of your vulnerabilities, your current cybersecurity posture, and helpful tips to secure your environment. We'll be providing a link to you via email for you to access it. Then we have our winner of the $100 Amazon gift card. It is Mike Coleman. Woo!
Mike,
All right.
congrats.
All right.
Good job,
Congratulations. All right. So we'll email you the details of your prize. Way to go, man. All right. So as we come to the end, I just want to thank you all for joining us today. It's been just great having this conversation with you, Eddie, and to hear all of your experiences and insights with our audience today. Eddie, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience before we let them go?
No, this has been great. Any opportunity I get to educate our customers, our end users, the general public, prospective customers, it's a wonderful opportunity because we all have to learn about this stuff and be aware. So, stay vigilant. That's what I want to leave you with. And we look forward to doing more of these in the future.
All right. Well, we appreciate you all for staying with us and hope you have a just great rest of your day. All right. Goodbye.
See you guys.